So this is joint work with Richmond, with Bear, and Jonathan Wadsworth from the Wire Holloway. So it's actually only preliminary work. We intend to do more on that once and if we are able to access better data. So I will explain that in a minute. So do a few slides of introduction, then we talk about the data. We need a bit of definition in data, especially in immigration, because people talk about the concept without using the same concept sometimes, and that makes things very confusing. And then we do a basic comparison of national trends within the data we've got. And then we look at the picture within local authorities, so within regions. And we do a few estimations as well to try to basically pull out as much information as we can from different measurements done at different level, at different geography level. So immigration is a very difficult endeavor to measure. Coming from a small country, before I moved here 20 years ago, and I did my PhD there, so I did that in Switzerland. And in Switzerland, you've got a register of immigration. So it's a small country, things are much easier. But in a way, I found a lot of similarity between what I've been doing here and what I was doing 20 years ago during my PhD. So we don't have in this country a registry of immigration, and the way we assess migration flows is mainly through surveys. And the main one in recent years has been the annual population survey, which is basically an extended, an enlarged sample, a regionally representative sample taken originally from the Labour Force survey. And it's approximately 200,000 people per quarter or per year there. And the other source of measurement of immigration in the country is through the IPS, the International Passenger Survey, that probably most of you have seen people from the ONS at the port of entry. So traditionally, England has been measuring immigration through entry into the country, rather than through investigating the place of living. So being an island, that's probably a long tradition linked to the fact that this is an island, and therefore the port of entry, the measurement at the point of entry is probably a rational thing to do. Now, the problem with the International Passenger Survey is that it's a very, very small sample, and therefore you can't draw any conclusion at regional level. And of course, both the APS and the International Passenger Survey rely enormously on the weighting, so the weight attached to every single individual that is being interviewed. If your weights are not fully representative of your immigrant population, probably we don't have the best assessment of immigration in this country. So, does anyone here work on immigration at ONS? Is an ONS migrants research? No? So, I think they're mostly based at Teachfield. So they have degraded the quality of the measurement of immigration to experimental in October. And this has probably come, we hope, through a bit of our work at ESCoE, but as well to the realization that a lot of those weights are not sufficiently taking into account of characteristics of the migrants population, and therefore we can't really use that as a proper measurement of immigration. So part of this project, the way it was set up originally by the team was very ambitious. We wanted to link lots of different data across different departments. Westminster. It quickly came about that it wasn't very easy to do, so we came up with a sort of an alternative strategy where we said, well, look at data that has maybe not been used so much to measure immigration, and we'll try we can infer something out of it. So we started by looking at flying. There was quite good information on the numbers of flights and people traveling through airports and the country, basically the city from where they're coming from. But then, of course, the problem if you use flying data, you have the problem of migration to Spain, how much of it is due to immigration or to simply changing pattern of people taking more holiday in Spain. So we gave up this avenue and we started looking at a register. So the electoral register is a register of which has its limitation, and we found what we're going to present here. So we investigate. So that's sort of recasting what I just said. We make graphical comparison mostly. We test a bit the three data out there to compare in terms of regional distribution, and then we try to assess a bit how different local authority record their immigrants differently across the data set. So the definition. So the official UN definition of an immigrant is whether you've been born abroad and you live in your host country for at least 12 months. So there's been discussion about, of course, that includes students or undergraduate students who, for most of them, stay more than 12 months, and according to this definition, will be considered as immigrants. Now, if we were only to use the APS and the census, we're going to use the census as well. Because it's only 1 year in 2011. We can use, you've got the country of origin, you've got the nationality, and you have the year since migration. So basically, you have everything you need there to use this definition. In the electoral register, at the moment, we don't have anything else than at the moment, we don't have anything, but we are using particularity of the electoral record in the sense that you've got two records. You have the local electors record, and you've got the parliamentary electors. And the difference between the two is allowing us to sort of identify EU people registered on the register. So we'll see that in a minute. In terms of nationality, I think we are fine because if you have dual nationality, you're probably more likely to record your British nationality in the electoral register and probably in the APS and the census as well. So in terms of comparison, it should be okay. So you all are part of the electoral register, or most of you, so all of you have used this form, but I've put one here because everyone I've spoke to and then subsequently showed them the sheet looked like as if they'd seen the sheet for the first time. So we probably do it, most of us, it's either our partner or it's us doing it, but we do it very, very quickly. We don't attach much importance to it. And for example, we don't notice that it's a legal requirement to do it, and you can be fined for up to £1,000 if you don't do it, if you don't answer by the deadline. And there is even more scary language a bit later at the point where you put your signature on it, where you can be imprisoned for up to 6 months or face an unlimited fine if the information recorded there is not accurate. So, I don't know if my local authority, which is Wandsworth, is particularly active on that front. Again, the discussion I've had with many people across the country seems that it's not necessarily the case. But you have an active canvassing, people knocking at your door if you don't answer within the deadline. And there is a clear, there is a statutory duty for local authority to compile and maintain those lists and to publish it with a cut-off date around beginning of December every year. So, as I said earlier, we are going to take advantage that we've got two different registers, and we've got the data for the period between 2004 up to 2007, and then we're going to compare to only 10% of the 2011 census. That's what we were able to access, and we're going to use the APS, the Annual Population Survey, over the same period. So if you look at the electoral register, I said earlier that it's basically made of two registers. So you've got every British citizen plus people, a member of the Commonwealth, who are going to be included under this line here, plus Irish, plus citizens from Malta and Cyprus. So those people are allowed to vote in any election. And then you add the European who are allowed to vote for European election. That's not going to last. That's over, finished. That's not going to last very long. And then you've got local election as well. So as well, European citizens are allowed to vote for local election. So I'm not too sure if anyone knows that, and so I haven't found out very clearly whether that we keep going or would be good in terms of data. So basically, you've got the difference between those two curves, which are people who are recorded as being from the European Union. And that's the measure we're using at the moment. So obviously, we would like to have access to the data on nationality, because there is a nationality recorded there. Another thing that would be quite useful as well to access is when the people entered for the first time the electoral register, because of course it's highly likely to be related to the period of when they arrived in the country. So it won't be a real time since migration, but it will give us a better idea of this. And then you will get age, I suppose. I'm not sure. Here the age is asked. So what do we do when we take? So we have the data for England and we have the data for Wales as well. We don't have that for Scotland or Northern Ireland. So the first thing that you observe on the data is that it's increasing up to a period, and then there's a very sharp decrease here. So we have a problem in the data in that sense. And where is that coming from, the decrease? Does anyone know why? There was a particular change in the registration of the way we are basically included in there in 2014. So we moved from the household
individual,
and we moved to the individual registration. So basically in 2014, there was the sense that a lot, the register needed a bit of cleaning out. University used to apparently register themselves, their students, to the local authority. So we had basically 100% of students registered. From 2014 onwards, this wasn't possible. We moved to an individual, so every individual in the country has got to himself or herself register itself online or on this kind of piece of paper. So that basically led to really drastic reduction in the numbers of people included there. Now, of course, for us, the drastic reduction doesn't necessarily imply that the difference, which is the measure we're using for immigration, changed a lot. But we will see it did affect the difference between the two curves as well. Right. Just a point for those who worry that the lowest point was 2015, and remember that there was a general election in 2015. I just read recently that actually this was reaching 2015 the lowest point after the general election. So basically, because it's December, the general election happened in May, that it wasn't at such a low point, the level that we had during the general election of 2015. So, what do we have when we basically use this difference? So when we use this difference, this is basically this blue curve here. And now we plot it with the APS. So the APS basically being the official figure used. So we don't exactly use the official measure because, of course, we need to adapt the measure to the one we have in the electoral register. So we simply look at citizen, people who have got a nationality from one of the EU country. So we exclude, of course, Irish and Cyprus and Malta. And so that the two curves should be more comparable. And we see they're basically increasing extremely similarly over time. But at the time where the registration system changed, the curve don't basically start to diverge. As I mentioned, it was the same situation in Wales. Wales, I don't know if we had any idea of why Wales was so close in the first of the period, but then it stagnated in the electoral register. I don't know Wales well enough. So could that be that disproportionately EU students were affected by the change? So what we do, we adjust our measurements by basically simply adding up. We're sort of assuming that all EU students all lost their registration. And if we do that and we add them in, so we take data from the HESA, from the education sector, and we take all the EU students and we add them. If that was the case, we would have a curve like this. So he basically correct a bit, but not exactly. So what do we compare? We do the same for Wales. Wales seems actually doing nearly the job. Now, so clearly the loss of participation in the electoral register for EU students is part of the story, but probably not the only reason for the reduction. A lot of the reduction came from basically cleaning of the register, so removing of double entries. But it's not yet clear to me, but I would be interested to have your view, if you have any, of why the clearing up of register affected more the EU national than the British in the register. Now, if you look at the figure since 2015, we see an increase again in the register, which actually is quite comparable to the one we're observing with the APS. So we're interested now to have the most recent data to see whether there isn't an increasing divergence of those two curves. It seems that there has been a change at one point, but then from 2015 the increase looks again quite similar. Now, of course, the big difficulty is to know. I realize when I'm talking, I'm sort of always relying to the APS as if the APS was the correct measure of immigration. Now, I'm not too sure whether it is. What's the actual numbers of people we have there? And what we can conclude from that. So, we want more recent figures. Now, that's for the national trend. We are actually more thinking that this survey would be useful to analyze regional distribution. And because it's the full population, it's not an extract, the numbers are probably large enough to look at different local authorities, and that's what we do. So if we list the top 50s, the LAs with the highest numbers of EU national across the 3 data sets, and for 2011 to have basically that's what we do in the report. So if you basically rank all the local authority by Ealing being in 2011 the one which has the highest number, absolute numbers of EU migrants or EU national, and you rank them, Brent being the second one as well. So you put the top 50 in terms of size of EU national, and then you compare across the 3 data, so the electoral roll, the census, and the APS, and you look at whether amongst the 50 that appear in the electoral register, how many of them appear in the census and the APS. You find actually it's very similar, approximately 46 or 45 of the 50 that we see in the electoral register appear as well in the census. And they all together accounts for around 60% of all national in the country. So now, if you basically do a descriptive table where you simply put the local authority by the size of the EU population, you see that if you compare the electoral register with the census in 2011, you see that you have nearly a 45-degree line. So the census is probably the better measure of immigration. The problem with the census that it appears only every 10 years. And as you move away from 2011, for example 2019, and that time, we are basically 9 years away, so things may have changed quite a lot. So that's why we choose 2011 there. Now, if we compare the electoral register with the APS, which is used for the official measurement of immigration, we see that the 45-degree line is a bit less. The local authority are less aligned on the 45 degrees line. So it's less of a good correlation between the two there. That's what we're doing. So we calculate this Spearman rank correlation, so that's to basically see whether the ranking I've just mentioned is similar across the data set. So we find that it is quite high, I think, 87, but the highest it is between when you compare the census and the electoral register, 97, 98. As well, we see that this rank correlation change over time, and there seems to be increasing over time. So if you compare the electoral register with the APS, it was at 86 at the beginning of the period, but it moved up to 91 towards the end of the period. So it seems that the rank seems to correlate quite well. Now if you look at the raw correlation, it's always very high at 96 and always very stable. Now, so that I have the first bullet point I've just said already. Yes, so change in the distribution over time. So we know through numerous reports that during this period, the immigrants, EU migrants, have distributed themselves differently to where they were allocated or living in 2004. So we have basically a regional distribution of migration, which is more equal after 2004, basically Polish and Romanians going to set up not only where their counterparts were living before, basically went to different areas that did not experience increasing immigration in the period before. So we see that if you look, if you compare the electoral register and the APS, you see a decrease in the proportion of total immigrants or total EU nationals that are accounted for the top 50, for the one with the top 50 LA with the highest numbers of LA. So that's sort of a first idea that immigration has been distributed, or immigrants have been moving to region away from the traditional region where they migrated before 2004, before the period. So we calculated huge numbers of inequality coefficients. I was checking on all the measures for this presentation. I end up always talking about the one I know the best, and I think is the clearest, the Gini coefficient. And you do find that inequality is amongst region or amongst local authorities a bit higher measured in the APS over the period. Sorry, that's in 2011. But the level of inequality measured, basically distribution of EU national in the electoral register is quite close, and it's a bit lower in the census. So again, not too sure which one is the correct one. I said before, the census, to my point of view, is probably the better measure of immigration. We could say that the electoral register is closer to the census than the APS. And that's across most measures. So, okay. That I think I've said, greater inequality, I've said that all of that. Now, what is interesting is to basically look at the change over time. So what I mentioned earlier, just what we see in our data is that true that immigrants after 2004 have tended to choose region of living or local authority a bit different to where they're basically national from the same region decided to migrate before that. So we see that both measures of inequality have decreased quite substantially, but we see an increase in, that's the Gini coefficient. So we see an increase in Gini coefficient here, which we probably attribute to the change of the problem we mentioned earlier, the cleaning up of the register. So I'm not sure I would attach too much importance to this increase here. You end up anyway to quite a lower level than you were at the start of the period. But as well, you see that the change in inequality is actually following the same pattern across the APS and the electoral register again. So that's another way of sort of apprehending the difference. Any question? Comments?
Could I just ask about the data, the data source? So is the data source aggregates of the full electoral register?
Yes.
Right, so they're aggregates of the full electoral register.
Yeah.
And how are they cleaned when you say you clean them?
Okay, I mean, we didn't do anything to data actually. We just took really the figure that were sent to us by ONS. Mm-hmm. They did it for us actually, to put it online for everyone to access, because originally the problem we had is that the two registers were recorded, were published online in a different way. The parliament electors were published at the constituency level. So at first we were trying to basically move from the constituency level electors to local authority ourselves, and it was getting really messy. And so we asked them to do it, and so they did that. So it's data published. So we're not clean at all that. Now, the cleaning of the register has only been done by the Electoral Commission. So
and to your knowledge, what do? They take out students that registered twice?
So,
parents
so it's interesting you ask, because I've been looking at that in the recent last few hours. When going from 2013 to 2015, so during this period, what they did is that they match the entries in the electoral register with the HMRC data. And they were able to match 35 million of them. Now, so for those 35 million, probably most of you, there wasn't any need to do more than just being transferred from 2014 to 2015 to 2016. Now, for all the ones where they couldn't match that, then they did the active canvassing. So they basically send those letters to remind us, and that's where the process ended up basically cleaning up, losing a large number of people.
Okay.
So probably the area where you lose observation is students, because students are in the past were registered by the university, but they were probably as well registered by their parents. So they probably were double counting for students. But now as well, movers, if you move from one local authority to the next and you don't basically announce officially you have left the local authority, you might be still appearing in the two registers. So, right. Any more questions on the cleaning the register?
It's possible to go back to the list of the 50 authorities, because they looked quite interesting. And they're very heavily London-centred.
Yes.
Very few incarnations outside.
Yeah.
And then one or two.
So
Yeah.
60, we did that this afternoon, didn't we? So 68%, 64% of EU are living in London. EU nationals are living in London. If you think of the 8 regions, and you take London as one of the 8.
I just wonder whether the fact that it is so heavily London-centred, what you're looking at, actually gives some clue as to what's going on with the differences.
Yeah.
Given the kind of living and the social setup in London as compared to elsewhere.
Yes. No, I agree. I think we need to look at far more details what's happening in London. And it would make our work easier because it's not as many local authorities to look at. I think Brent, as a sort of people who work on migration in this country, always think Brent. So you've got Brent, Tower Hamlets, that's the two ones. So of course Tower Hamlet is not for immigration from the European Union, but that's the two sort of really large immigration local authority in the country. So I was not surprised at all to see Brent out there. But indeed, yeah, immigration is a London mostly phenomenon.
Yeah, I mean, well, Coventry's there, but yes, Coventry's there, but very little from the Midlands, and actually Sheffield is there, I suppose.
Sheffield, yes.
But the northwest, not really heavily represented.
Manchester's up in the top 15.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, there.
Okay, yes.
Birmingham, of course. Peterborough,
Leicester.
Bristol, Leeds. Nottingham, yeah.
Not Liverpool.
Neither Newcastle.
But you've got Peterborough in there, haven't you, which is the east of England. It's been the topic of conversation, hasn't it?
Have you done any analysis linked to this with non-EU migration?
No. So, non-EU, if they are not in the, but basically at the data we have at the moment, we can't. Because we have only the difference between the parliamentary electors and the local electors, and that we can get at the EU. Now, the Commonwealth will be in the parliamentary electors. So if we can get to the data, then it becomes much easier. But we will only capture the one who are part of the Commonwealth, which is, I suppose, a big chunk of the non-EU migration.
And do you distinguish between first generation EU migration and second generation?
No, that's absolutely not, because we only use the difference between the two. So, having said that, of course, the way you are entered in the register is through when you turn 16, sorry. Your parents got to put you down. So I did that for my son who just turned 16 last year. So we are not there, of course, having all the lessons than 16. So you see the number that we have, that we don't have the people between 0 and 15. You would assume quite a lot of them are British, probably, because they're probably born in the country and the parents have been here for more than 4 years, and therefore they're born British. But we don't know that. We could actually, of course, do that based on the APS and Census to see. That's actually good. You can look at less than 15 and maybe less than 16, see what difference does make in the APS and the Census.
And have you done any analysis of those that are registered and non-registered? Because there have been biases in, say, the last decade where some people do not like politicians and politics.
Yes.
Decide for tax reasons, like local tax, they wouldn't register. They're legitimate citizens and not migrants. They may be migrants as well, a mix. And then obviously as politics changes, the economy changes, policies change, they decide to register. So that doesn't give you real change. No. That's just an approach that's going on. So I don't know if there's any...
There has been some work by a guy I know quite well, Charlie Greenwood, who a long time ago in 2004 was at the time working at the ONS, where he linked immigrants in the register and interviewed in the labor force survey. So of course, great in the labor force survey because you have the years of arrival, and he was finding that, not surprisingly, new migrants may take a bit of time to register in the electoral register, but basically by, I think, year 8 or 10, there are more or less 100% are in the register. One of the reasons I was, for example, very keen myself to be in the register is because I wanted to get a credit card and I wanted to get a car insurance. If you are not on the electoral register, when you do your search on your car insurance, you've got your usual 200 offered, policy offered, but approximately 90% of them decline you because they can't check your identity. So the way for me, being a citizen of Switzerland and not part of the EU, it was critical that I was on the register as soon as possible. Now, yes, I've read that some nationals refuse to be on the register, but not sure the extent of this. I think it is actually, it's not that small. But yes, not looked at that too much, to be honest. I sort of rely on this very scary £1,000 fine, hoping that it's scared. Not sure how true that as a threat. Now, what I think could be useful part of this report is to look a bit more at which local authority behave a bit differently to the others. And the way to do that is doing very simple regression estimate, where we simply look at the numbers in the local authority of EU national measured in the annual population survey, and we regress that on the number we have collected in the electoral register. So a beta there will be a sort of a measure of the link between the two, but more interested than our beta here is probably our coefficient estimated for our local authority dummies here, because this should be capturing different sort of canvassing intensity at the level of the local authority. So we introduce basically one dummy for each local authority, so we've got 347 there, and we look at those coefficients to see basically how the intercept vary. If we were to find that the two measures were exactly identical, we would have, of course, a 45-degree line. This coefficient would be 1, and if the behavior was identical in every local authority, all those coefficients here would be 0. So you have 35-degree line. You need to have something where if this is 0, all of those are 0, and this is 1. If they were exactly leading to the same measurement. Now that's what we get. So we don't find out quite at all. The slope, so the beta, is not equal to 1 at first when we just do the correlation, and the constant neither is not equal to 0. So that's because the two measures are not identical, and that's exactly what we saw earlier, so there's nothing really added in there. Now, when we introduce the LA dummies, we see that at first the coefficient goes up, but ultimately it goes down by quite much, to the point where when we control for year dummies and as well the change in the registration method that happened in 2014, we do find that this coefficient is not significantly different from 1. So that's good in terms of the measurements. So in a way that's reassuring that the APS doesn't give a story which is completely different to the APS. Now it's a bit less clear in terms of how to interpret those coefficients. We don't rely enormously on which is the omitted category. And here we have omitted Bradford. But what we are interested more, is that that's basically exactly what I've said. What we do is that we extract the fixed effect. So we extract those effects here, all those estimated coefficients here, we take them out, and we look at them a bit better to see how they differ across local authority. And we draw them on a distribution here So we see that some of them have a very negative, but it's a very tiny number here, which have a very negative number, but most of them are actually around 0, meaning more or less that they are actually, those two measures are not that different. But we have got some local authority for which the values is negative. And what does that mean? That means that basically the APS tend to give overestimate for those local authority the size of EU nationals. So what are they? So the question we can, and that's probably the last thing we can do at this point, is simply to take those effects and to try to explain them maybe by the size of the population in those local authority. Maybe when you have a very large local authority, the canvassing is more difficult for the electoral register, and therefore less EU migrants are measured there. So we try to explain those fixed effect by basically the size of the population as it is measured in 2011. And then we put a constant, but what we do as well is that we put region dummies. And I write here, we write here the dummies. So we see that actually the reference point is London, and the coefficient for London is the one that the constant is going to capture. So it is very negative in 2,366 on an average of 4,000. So that's basically quite a lot of mismeasurement in a way of through the electoral register of EU population in London. So you see that in every other region, those numbers are all positive. The fact is that significantly different from 0 is not so interesting. The real interest is to compare those coefficients with the one we get in London. So basically, we need to test whether every one of those coefficients differ very significantly from the one in London. They do for all of them. So, yes, any comment on that? I'm looking at my colleague, Jack.
I was going to ask. So just to get my head around this, your idea is that the census data you think gives the best measure overall, but the problem, is that that's every 10 years.
Yes.
And you want to come up with essentially like a clever interpolation of the census data using some other measure.
Yes.
And I'm thinking then for your regressions, then would it, going back to the conversation we had about nowcasting, it might actually make sense to have your census data on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side have these measures which you're constructing, which are higher frequency, and then you could essentially use the fitted values on the census data to kind of back out a clever interpolation of the census data using the electoral roll or anything else.
That's a good idea.
In actual fact, you could also use any other data like the airline data or anything like that, which is even monthly or whatever.
Yes.
Could you also put the regional dummy into the first equation to effectively control out for this before you look at the local authority level?
Yeah. That the only limitation with it is that its sample size reduced enormously, because of course we have only 247 local authority in 2011. Now we could use the 2001 census. That would give us sort of two measurement points, but the problem at the moment we don't have 2001 electoral register. But that would be, I mean that's definitely one way forward. So I've been sort of grappling with this notion that people might say, yes, but nationality is not immigration. Is it really not? I think it's quite close to immigration at the end of the day. You will, as you stay longer in a country, your likelihood of becoming British increases. But in a way, I'm not so worried about that. I'm not so worried about really sticking to this measurement of saying, okay, an immigrant is someone who is foreign born and who has been living 12 months in a country. Well, yeah, basically, I'm sort of quite comfortable with the notion that in this report we're measuring immigration by nationality, but I don't know if anyone agree or disagree very strongly on that. I've just invited at my place Sunday night a citizen of Germany who moved in the country in 1947. So of course he's a bit, he's super British, but he's not. He's basically, he's still German. So that goes a bit against my my interpretation. But I mean, it tells something about him as well. The fact that he never wanted to become British and he always stayed German. Therefore, never voted on the parliamentary election. Of course, his wife is British. All his children are British. Right, that's more or less what we have reached. So what we really want, and that's a plea bargain to our friends and colleagues from the ONS, please help us. We are going to teach field next week to present that as well to the research RAS.
The conference.
Yes. And there will be the people from the health, from the population unit. And so it's obviously very exclusive data because you've got the name there. So we are interested in the name, but I imagine, and the data is maintained not by the ONS, but by the Electoral Commission. So as I understand, it's a man called Neil Park. Does anyone know Neil Park? No? He's in charge of the relationship with at ONS with the Electoral Commission, and he's the one who really helped us by basically putting online those local authority measures of parliamentary electors. So if we could get to this data, the nationality, that would enormously improve this work, because suddenly we can compare different nationality at local authority level, and we can as well see very very interesting thing about whether some nationality tends to register more or less in the local election register, but then it will tell us as well whether they are more likely or the intention to stay, because that's probably for people who want to stay longer, that will be more likely to register in the electoral register. So that, I mean, and I don't think that such disclosive, if we could get the data by nationality or the top nationality in each local authority, that would help us enormously. The last one, probably that's definitely nobody in this room. Is people from the Home Office who are actively maintaining the data on the settlement program. You heard about the settlement program, probably for most of you, and they're publishing monthly data on the numbers of EU migrants who are applying for settlements. Now, if we could get this data segregated at the local authority level, and by nationality. Again, that would add an extra data for 2 years, for 2011 and 2020, and I don't think that's so disclosed neither, but at the Home Office, so imagine, not very likely. There's the domestic a good relationship with the Home Office.
Oh, we have a good relationship with everyone. They still may not give us data.
They seems to be having a lot of data on immigration that they are not happy to share with anyone. Not the owners, neither the Migration Delivery Committee. And I'm not completely clear why. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you.